first you want to maybe introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Frank Cantwell. I am the principal, director de escuela of Holy Family Parish School. This is my 5th year here. Before that, I think it's a little of interest is that I was a teacher, math chair, and coach at Chief South High School, which is only about 2 miles from here. So I've been living and working in the local community for almost 9 years.
Nice. So one of the questions that we have is, how have the school changed over the years in terms of race or populations or ethnicity?
Well, this parish was predominantly, I believe, Italian long before I was ever here, and so if nothing else, it was a white parish for the most part, where the predominant members of the parish and the school were background was white. And I would say, I'm not exactly sure when it started changing. I believe the parish started changing about 15 years ago with a large influx of the Latino community living in the South Seattle area. And the school itself was somewhat separate from the parish for a long time. And when I first got here about 5 years ago, there was some inroads to connect the parish and the school. But I feel that there was all these children that would go to church on Sundays. It was like 10 to 1, 10 Latinos compared to all the rest of the other ethnicities. Mm-hmm. And so we needed to do something to serve them. Also, having been at Chief South, a lot of the Latino community was not graduating from high school. And so we started doing some investigations and started looking at it. And we discovered that there's certain ways that you can help out the Latino population, make them feel more successful, and they are more successful. And that is, we started a dual language program here. We started hiring teachers that speak Spanish as well. So we have 7 bilingual teachers that speak Spanish. But also, not just Latino, I'd like to add, is that we had a large Filipino and a large Vietnamese community. And we have 2 people on the staff that are Vietnamese. One of them speaks fluently, the other one speaks but not as well. And we have a lot of Filipinos on the staff. Most of them speak English and Tagalog, and some of them speak Tagalog, which isn't too far away from the Spanish. Right. And we have Miss Wilson, who's the assistant principal, who also started the inroads of this because she was here long before I. She came from Romania, and there's a lot of background between Romanian and Spanish, so it helps. I think helping speak the language helps volumes. So,
following the fact that you said that students are now starting to integrate themselves more into the school system and stuff like that, what are you, in your perspective, what are some factors that that influence these young individuals to pursue perhaps a higher education now compared to the past experiences where the dropout rates were much higher?
I'm not sure if the dropout rates have improved drastically yet, to be honest with you. I do know since we've started looking at the dual language work. Let me give you some numbers too. Last year we were, about 90% minority, so non-white, say. And it was over 40% Latino and about 20% Vietnamese and 20% Filipino. And then another 20% of different things, 10% white. This year, we've actually, the percentage of white is improved by 1%. But we've increased our overall population, and we have 38% Latino. And 15% Vietnamese, 16% Filipino, 11% white, 5% black, and 14% multi. We have a lot of multiracial, and that's just a result of multiracial marriages, which I think will break down walls eventually, personally. Right. Because I don't think, love very often doesn't ever see color. Right. And I think eventually that will break down a lot of the barriers that we have today. So, but talking about the success, I think this program is just in its infancy. And There's two schools in the Archdiocese that are doing dual language programs. But there's also there's 2 schools, or 3 schools now in Seattle and a couple of schools in Highline. I think they're just, and it's not for every school. And so I think this will help, because this Latino students, I found that they were behind their peers in reading and writing. And I think this program will help that. I also think that it's a matter of priority. Some families, they feel that it's not important necessarily to get a college education. I think it's because you can go out there and work and earn a salary that's good, but those jobs are becoming fewer and fewer.
Right.
You know, so you have to get the college education if you want to be successful down the road.
Right.
I hope that helps.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on to our next question. What is the Latinos' influence to the community? How do they? I mean, I understand because I'm involved in much of the church's activities and stuff like that, especially around the year when the new fiestas and activities like that come along. How much of the Latino influence actually comes throughout the whole community?
Well, the parish is predominantly Latino. I mean,
Right.
most of the events are Latino. The Filipinos have some, Vietnamese have some, but the parish is dominated primarily by the Latino. I mean, there's I guess 300-400 go to a regular non-Latino mass, where 1,000 will go to a Spanish mass, and all the youth are there too, all the kids.
Right.
And so the youth is in the Latino community. And so I think the school has just come on board in the last couple of years by hiring teachers that can speak Spanish and English. And we'll teach them half in English and half in Spanish, so that they'll learn how to read and write in Spanish to keep their culture, and so that they can read books at home, which they're not reading right now. And the English will come along, because the skills of reading and writing, once they get them down in Spanish, will transfer over to English, and they'll be better language speakers, English language speakers as well, as knowing how to properly read and write Spanish.
Right.
So.
Okay.
So the last question we have is, knowing that you guys did your best to make this things happen, what did the other communities did to help this school develop
You know,
the neighborhood?
that's a great question. I think there's people that want to help, but change is hard. Anytime you have any change, even maybe if a change for good, change is just hard. I remember in my principles course, one course was just basically on change. And sometimes the most efficient way is to make drastic changes. But it tends to be very difficult because people are unaccepting of that. Right in my own community, sometimes the Vietnamese and the Filipino community is a little concerned that, not a lot, a little, that there'll be too much of an emphasis on the Latino community and they won't get their share, so to speak. The research indicates that, like a Vietnamese student that already is learning his Vietnamese language and English and Spanish, will actually test out better than any of the students, any of the white students or brown students or anybody. They tend to test it. The brain, we just barely tapping our brain power. And the more we learn, the more we can tap that brain and enlarge it, the better you're going to learn and the better they're going to do. So I have to show to them that this is a good change and that the students are capable of doing it. It's just, change is hard. Language is a tough barrier to break down. Some people think everybody should come to America and speak English. It's just not happening. It's probably not going to happen. I think it's one thing. I'm an Irishman, and I love my Irish roots. And I'm proud of them. But I don't think though that I would ever want a Latino to come here and not give up his roots. I think he should be proud of who he is. Same as a Polish person or a Romanian. I think they should be proud of what they are, know who they are and what they are. I think they should learn English too, but I'm trying to learn Spanish for what it's worth myself. I'm going to school for it, by the way.
Right.
Community college.
One of the things that I saw on your blog on the website, it says that on 2013, there will be, I don't know if it says a requirement that there will be a Spanish class.
We have Spanish classes in we right now our 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, and 5-year-olds are learning half in English, half in Spanish. Grades 1 through 8 have approximately 40 minutes a day, whereas generally in elementary schools it's an hour a week. We're doing it more like high school; it's an hour a day. So.
And as far as history goes, how much of the school officially teaches like the history of populations here in Washington State, or here specifically within this community? How much of the Latino population influence that, or is integrating with that history?
Well, we try to. I don't like to specifically go over the Latino population necessarily. I think it's important to learn all the history of everything. So, we're required by law. I think it is to, and I don't quote me on this. I don't think you have to have Washington State history until you graduate from high school. I think it's a graduation from high school requirement.
Right.
Generally, we try to have them have Washington State history by the time they leave our school. But as far as I think, history is history, and all ethnicities should get their share of history and what's important.
Right.
So.
No, yeah, sorry. I mean, the fact that I asked that question was because much of the stuff that we're covering right now in this class specifically, I only learned it came to learning in this class my first time, and when I was in high school, none of that was covered. So.
Did you have world history in high school?
What was that? No, I had Washington State history.
Yeah.
And,
so if you had world history, you should have been covering some of that. But we had a multicultural night every other year or so, but I really like it, so I try to push for it every year. And a lot of the parents bring in their cultures, and we have like almost 30 different countries represented here at Holy Family. I think last fall it was 28, and I just loved it. I thought it was the best night of the year because a lot of the parents dressed up their kids in their native garb. Chile, Argentina, now Peru, Mexico, Guatemala. This year we've hired a teacher from Spain, and her husband's going to be the cook.
Oh. So one last thing.
Sure.
Is there anything that you wanted to share that you think we should know?
Well, I think the emphasis on Latino here is there's two major reasons. One is because the preponderance of our population, especially our elementary school and younger population, is Latino, and our school is a parish school and should serve those. I also think that people should realize that, I have it written down, but I think about 1/6 of our population, this is off the top of my head, so don't quote me, about 1/6 of our population now is Spanish. And I think by 2050, if I remember correctly, almost 1/3 of the U.S. is going to be Spanish speaking.
I think you mentioned, I think it's 29% by 2050.
Is that what it? Okay.
I think that's.
Is that what? Okay, it's around 1/3. Okay.
Yeah.
And I don't care who you are, what ethnicity you are. It would behoove you to learn how to speak Spanish.
Right. No.
Because if you're a boss, somebody, 1/3 of your employees are likely to be Spanish speakers.
Right.
So, I think it helps when you speak the language of who you work with.
Right.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Sure.
Thank you so much. I
Sure.
appreciate your time.